and it had to do with about God's perfect forgiveness. And there was a preacher that was holding a revival, and he, a guy had come into the revival and talked to him and whatever, and the preacher told him what he didn't want to hear, and he went out and left the revival and slashed the preacher's tires, and said, it's a story, so it's kind of ethereal. So the preacher and the Lord are at another revival 10 years later, and the guy walks in and he starts attending the revival and everything, and the preacher looks over at the Lord and says, "Man, that's the guy that slashed my tires 10 years ago." And the Lord says, "I don't even know who that guy is." I don't know who he is, but he said, I didn't know he slashed any tires because the moral of the story is that the guy had asked for forgiveness about the tires. The preacher man held on to it. The Lord goes, "He just looks like Joe."
That never happened. Yeah.
And so I don't know, for some reason, like such a stupid little story, like I don't know, it sticks with me like it's the best thing I own. Like
awesome.
like to think about that the guy, that the Lord's like, "Hey, it's Steve. Hey, it's Charlie Manson. I think he killed millions of people. Who's to know? Maybe Manson's come to the Lord." The Lord goes, "Hey, it's Charles."
Hey, Chuck.
The rest of the world goes, "How dare you? Charles Manson is evil." He probably is. He's just an example. But you know what I'm saying? Like the stuff that I'm choosing to hold on to.
Well, Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Perfect example.
Thank you.
Perfect example.
Did Jeffrey Dahmer's also come to Christ? I heard before he was.
I don't
killed.
remember. That sounds kind of familiar.
I think he came to Christ before he was killed in prison. So
yeah, and that's a tough one.
That'd be a hard.
Look at our ranks.
Right.
Look at who we got on our side. The murderer. But I mean, there's an excellent. We were talking about David a little bit earlier. He's the excellent biblical example. I mean, think about the stuff that he was responsible for. He was a liar. I mean, he was, the consequences of his actions caused, villages to be taken out. His family was, very messed up for many, generations after his actions. He was, he was an adulterer. He was a murderer, and then, he's got the stones to show up in Psalms, and he's like, "Vindicate me, O Lord, for I have led a blameless life. I have trusted in the Lord without wavering." That's not him, right? That's not
Who
him.
are you referring to again,
Yeah,
David?
But God's grace makes that accurate. I have led a blameless life. Is it like at the time that he seeks, God's grace? Yeah, he has led it. I mean, historically, it's a bit shaded from a people perspective, right? But
Right.
but to get an understanding of God's grace, that statement, which seems so contradictory and false, can be accurate. To a loving God whose grace is sufficient to cover all that stuff. Something that we as people, we look at and we can't fathom. And I think that's where the shortcoming here is. I mean, I think it'd be it's an odd thought to think, well, God's grace covers up to X, and then then it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. That's probably not up for a large debate. But as an example to us, what types of things as followers of Christ do I hold on to that God has let go, a second after the person, gave it to him, and
or even in our own lives.
Yeah,
we don't forgive ourselves.
Yeah,
oftentimes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the tough, and our examples can be extreme. We're willing to. The heavier sin is the sin that someone else is committing, right? Mm-hmm. Not the one that I tell lies here and there, no big deal. I steal a penny or two from the get and go. Take a penny. It says take a penny, doesn't it? Can't be stealing. It
just
says
following
to take
directions.
one. And I just took all of it once because I'm not going to be back in here during the week. I don't want them all gone next time I come in. Right. So but the bigger sin is the adulterer. The bigger sin is the murder. But I mean, that guy's on the same playing field as you. Every sin separates you from God, and it's almost the big deceit is the thought that his is bigger than mine. That other person's is bigger than mine. And that's Bill, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean that's the biggest downfall of people who don't want to go to an organized church service for almost that exact reason, because people feel that way. The church is
not good enough,
right. The church for so long has said, we have good people here, good people that lie and good people that steal and good people that slander, and but they're not killing people. They're not cheating on their wives. They're not cheating on their husbands. They're not homosexual. Whatever. They don't believe in abortion. You pick all the hot button issues and say we don't do those. And then when someone comes in, and they start pointing fingers, and that really grinds me. And I am not in support of any of those things.
No,
but I can't stand to to watch them stand on their post and point fingers at people and say, these are the reasons that we don't like you. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm going down for way smaller stuff in my opinion, but it's the same stuff to the Lord. The stuff that makes me
But you need to get yourself right with Christ.
right.
Yeah,
There you
right.
go.
It's
Yeah.
arrogance
Oh,
on
absolutely.
side of believers oftentimes.
Spiritual pride.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Look what I have accomplished. Look what I am in Christ. And it's like, you did nothing.
Right.
Jesus did it all. And we forget that.
That almost goes back to the Old Testament. Like I'm following all these laws. I'm
Exactly.
doing exactly. You know, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Exactly.
And walk with my head held high.
And it's weird that there's two dichotomies, right? It's both of them have to do with action, one positive, one negative, right? You can't, good yourself away into God's graces, but you can't out sin it either, right? You can't do enough to say, okay, God says I'm going to take that guy because look at what he's done. But if you're coming back to God earnestly looking for His grace, you can't do enough to not get it, And it's a weird dichotomy, and it's something that I think people struggle with is they get these very narrow or shallow visions of what following Christ looks like. Either I have to do all these things or I can't do it because I've done these things, and the extremes of both are neither true.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So
You asked the woman at the well, right?
yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
Where grace should humble us rather than make us arrogant.
Right.
Because we're all in that same boat. We're all a bunch of selfish, prideful, arrogant jerks that need forgiveness. And when we receive it, it should be just this humbling thing. Wow, God forgave me, and rather than I got it together and you don't.
Right. The Lord's got to work harder to forgive you.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Look at
made it
me.
easy for him.
I
I
got a
only
really
did a
thick
couple
Bible.
things this week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's not the case. Right. So like the church scenario, you got a guy that walks into the church off the street, and he meets a member of the church, and he says, "Hey, I'm here because I, whatever. Welcome to XX Church." And then he says, I cheated on my wife, and I felt I needed to come in and say, "Well, I yelled at my kids for no reason. Let's hit the altar." What I'm saying? Like it's the same. It's the same basic. There's a separation from God there, and a seeking of forgiveness and grace from God. The weird thing is when you will find churches trying to balance this thing oddly. Some will try to diminish the sin just because they're equal. They're both equally bad.
Right.
Not like they're both equally, because the humanity side will say white lie, adultery. How can you say those are the same thing? And those have a human impact, but it's an equivalent sin to God. All sin separates us from God, right? Mm-hmm. And so you look at that stuff, and sometimes we give the impression, in order to blend in society a little bit better, is that that stuff can be taken care of. Well, that's true. It completely can. But the consequence of it is they're both equally bad. Not adultery gets closer to being a white lie from a human standpoint. So it's a weird thing for the church, I think, to get across, to say, look, what you're doing is wrong. It's just totally wrong. God says it's wrong, and you need to be asked for forgiveness. But let's call a spade, and then let's work on the spade. And I think it's a tough balance. I think sometimes you'll see Christ followers like back away from, it's not too bad. It is bad. It's bad. However, it's easily taken care of if your faith is put in the right direction and you understand the depths of God's grace. So,
I concur.
Yeah.
I also concur.
I think we'd just be done right now.
Flag that tape.
So, yeah.
We got is it time for the Q&A? What time is it? Yeah. Did anybody have any? I haven't seen it. Sorry, we've been rambling for a while. Was there any questions on the chat? You guys think about anything? Sonia had said, had thrown a quote out there from Romans 6, says, "What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We died to sin. How can we live it in it any longer?"
That would be the slap to God's face right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they were thinking, man, we're making God look good.
Yeah.
Look at all this stuff you forgave me of this week.
Yep.
Well, God, I'm going to do this stuff next week. You can forgive me and you'll look even better.
Even back in the day, you got to know that you're not pulling this fast one. Whatever, you've come up with as a good plan. Honest, you got to know in your heart of hearts the Lord is not on tap with this.
Right.
He's like, I created you guys. I know how this works.
I've seen your kind forever.
Well, plus, it's a huge lack of trust. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to. That's how I look at it too. The God is saying, obviously I don't